my students. It's my pleasure, to give you or to deliver lecture 21st today. Okay, as you see, our class will be about Emily Dickinson, but as a point of entry, because last week we did Whitman, so today we're going to approach Emily Dickinson. But I thought a point of entry would be to start comparing between the two, to compare and contrast, and hopefully, after this lecture, we might be able to delineate two characteristics that represent certain American aspects or certain aspects in American life. Before we start, I need to listen as usual to a report about last week. Yes, Sahar, you're welcome.
And I used the style of Whitman in listing. So it's from the general till I celebrated my personal self. I called it Contradicting Colors of Hope. From this cosmic vastness, I celebrate my existence. I celebrate that I had the chance to be here on earth, to be part of this world, to be one of Adam's children, and among all these creations, I celebrate being a human. I celebrate the non-stopping sounds of Adhan all over the world, the mosques, the Muslims, everywhere and anywhere. I celebrate being a Muslim. Yet I celebrate all religions and know that we are all connected under the same sky, same earth, same air of breathing. We are all seeking the same path of salvation, of mercy, of eternity. We are all for one and one for all. We all searching for God's mercy and affirmatively know that He is the one who will protect us, save us, and stand with us in every step we pass. I celebrate being an Arab in which one of the holy religions is sent by their tongues. I celebrate my language, my Arabic language, the best one that could express all feelings, things, and ideas comprehensively. I celebrate being a Palestinian girl, and I sing all the colors in my land. I sing for the green, yellow, black, and red color, in which one is not divided to quarters, but they are quarters of one, in which they are all intimate, creating a picture of mixing colors, tuning to sing the land of freedom. I am the poet of citizens, the new-made classifications of refugees, the refugees of their own land, the refugees in their own land. I am the poet of indigenous people. No, it wasn't a virgin land. I am the poet of Gaza. I am the poet of the West Bank. I sing for the breathing air of Gaza's sea and the West Mountains air. I sing for the sunset in Gaza and the bright colors of the same sunset behind the Al-Aqsa Mosque, Al-Aqsa Dome. I sing for the rains in Gaza and the snow there. I celebrate the olive tree here, there, and everywhere, which always shades us with the shadow of peace, comfort, and love. I celebrate the night that connects again each part of this land together. I celebrate its voice that loudly reaches to all over the world, singing, telling our suffering. I sing for the colors of only one and one flag, a color of green for our land, white for we before we made refugees. There was eternal peace, red for the blood sacrificed to free this land, and black for life under the black occupation, and still it will be black after freedom to mourn the martyrs who gave their lives to give us life. I celebrate the contraries of life. It was from the very beginning of Adam's fall. Yes. It was a punishment, yet a bliss for all. We fall, then work hard and worship God, so to paradise we can again rise all. It was in us ourselves. We are surrounded inside our mother's body by through darkness. We go out to see a lot of brightness. It doesn't matter how much long the night will be, since the rays of the dawn will continually sing on earth every day. It doesn't matter how many dreams have been broken at reality's rock. One day we will be shocked of fulfilling our dreams, in which we ourselves will be the Roland Rock. It doesn't matter how much hatred, envy, and despise there is. There are millions of smiles and loves there happiness is. It doesn't matter how many wars we lived, the flags of peace will be raised again and again as gifts. Our lives are but colors of contradictions. They are in the circle completing each other's functions. I celebrate myself being happy with me. This is the whole idea, where encouragement would only come from inside me. We have to trust this inner voice inside our hearts, our skulls, and every atom of us calling us to trust ourselves. It is ability. It is our ability to express wonder and joy, and the same ability to express sadness and woe. We can see loneliness in the slow movements of the hands of the clocks, yet we can see the happiness, our cheerful moments with our families, friends, lovers, by every tick, tick, ticks. It is we who determine the events to happen rather than waiting it to happen. Light, darkness, joy, woe, ebb, flow, good, evil, love, and loss are all intertwined in the infinitum of this earth. So we have just to follow the pure light from this vacuum, follow the blast of our energy. Life is but a contradicting colors from beautiful portraits, form beautiful portraits. I enjoy singing the symphony of such colors, colors of hope. Thank you. I'm sorry for being so long.
It's amazing. I think we should congratulate ourselves for having a Palestinian Whitman, a Palestinian Whitman who learned the lessons from his master Emerson, because I see Emerson is there, the idea of the circle. So it's very interesting, and I think you should, this is like a manuscript. What you have just read is a manuscript, and we're very proud to have a student like you celebrating herself. I'm sure like everybody celebrated herself in the same way or in a different. If you feel you have something to celebrate more, we have one, another chance. Yes.
Why shall I celebrate myself? I will not exaggerate myself and my skills to respond to this question, because I myself convinced that sometime I have to celebrate myself, but sometime not. Why shall I celebrate myself? Because I'm everything. I'm everything in this life. The first daughter to my family. I'm girl, single, not wife, have 2 years plus 20. Educated, clever, and smart, defending and standing with right. Will not give up or cry, I will try as butterfly. But why I don't have the right to celebrate myself? Because I'm a refugee in my land, cannot go to Al-Aqsa to pray. But who can understand there is my right to stay? Eyewitness for Israeli crime, humiliation, killing, detonation, all time. Standing, doing nothing, cannot dispel tears of mother's Martha, helpless to freedom fighter. Finally, I will celebrate myself when I pass this course, American Literature.
Hopefully all of you will pass. I don't know why you harbor such fear. You're doing well so far, and I should celebrate myself for having good students like you, even though they're complaining about the exam, but you still you are great students. Okay. Yes, this week we are supposed to start Emily Dickinson. So before we start, have you read something about Emily Dickinson? What do you think of her? Yes, Isra?
She is known as the woman in white because she was always dressing in a white dress.
Mm-hmm.
And she was despised from her society because she was isolated and she didn't meet her community. And
you mean she was isolated? Was she self-isolated, or her society,
she was self-isolated.
So she chose to isolate herself.
Those who want to celebrate her poetry and to comment on their or to respond to their questions and comments.
So she dedicated her life to her poetry. This is what you want to say.
The society thinks that she didn't want to meet them or to interact with them. So her poetry was published secretly and even sometimes with changing her name and giving a pen name to her poetry. So she didn't actually celebrate her skill of writing poetry while she was alive.
Mm-hmm. She didn't want to be published while she was alive.
I think her sister published two of her poems without telling her.
Okay. Yes. Yes, Ranin. Thank you very much, Isra.
I think she's one of the greatest books America has created ever.
Okay.
Actually.
Yeah, this is a good proclamation, and you might justify why she's a good, the greatest
when I
poet.
was preparing the poems here, when you the first reading you think that this is vague, ambiguous, what is the hell she is saying. But after going to analysis, it is something. There is something hidden. Actually, there is a significant meaning after her poems. And the fact that she has written many poems, but she asked them not to publish them. I don't know
She was
why.
very prolific.
Yeah.
She wrote more than 2,000. Yeah, they say 1,800, but in fact they are more than this.
Only 7 during her life were published. But regarding the topics that she was talking about, such about death and mortality, immortality, that's why she is considered as the lady of the dark side. Because most of her topics are themed about such dark themes.
So she's not like Whitman, yeah?
Yes.
She's
Not
the
pessimistic or something.
opposite. Yes?
About her theme about death and mortality, maybe because she was affected by the death of her father, then after her mother, and she's still single without marriage after she loved someone, but she married another one. Maybe this is the reason behind.
Okay, talking about life and death, I think the way she was talking about death was a little bit, strange, Death was not very intimidating. Death was not frightening. When I say because I could not stop for death, she, her approach or her attitude towards death was very positive because, there was a kind of cordiality between her and, death. So her approach, her attitude towards death was not like traditional. Yeah, it was different. Yes, more, yes.
It was like different. She was known for her style that using a lot of fragments.
Yeah, dashes.
Dashes and fragment sentences. So it's like non-completed sentences everywhere. So nothing complete in her poems.
Yeah, I don't know. This is like there should be a reason for this. Is it like,
Maybe she cannot, like, she wants to portray the woman at that society. They cannot speak. They don't. Yes, they are fragmented and chained.
yeah, it could be a kind of a challenge. It could be a kind of, her perception of reality. Because, there, yes. I mean, this is a good, why she wrote in that way? Why she, her poetry is full of dashes, Yes, Taj?
About your style also, when I read it, it was like very simple, very short. But when I read it, I get nothing because it's full of symbolism and ambiguity. So we can't say that it's simple poetry. No, it is very complex.
She's simple to read but difficult to understand. This is like the paradox. Yeah.
And even if it has dashes, when they publish it, they adapt it and they change some of her style. So they didn't respect even her way of writing.
Okay.
Two examples.
Yeah. Her editors were not like living out the spirit of her poetry. Okay, yes. What about the others? Like, yes, Ranil?
We have something about her style, about other than the short lines or something. We have the capitalization. We have, for example, because I could not stop. This is capitalized immortality. We have this.
Yeah, the graphology itself.
Yes.
Yes, the last.
Another thing mentioned in her biography is that, like, when we think about women writers, we think about quest of identity or feminism. But her style is totally different. Despite the fact that in her life, she was facing a burden that she didn't have servant to help her, and everything was upon her. So she was facing a problem in her life, in her domestic life, even though her poetry didn't reflect this as Anne Bradstreet.
Uh-huh.
So
So she was different, like from Anne Bradstreet.
It's genuine and
But don't you think that she was continuing tradition of Anne Bradstreet? Like, today I'm bringing you a book called The American Triptych, and you have 3 women writers, like Anne Bradstreet, Emily Dickinson, and Adrienne Rich. So this writer, Wendy Martin, like sees that these like three American women like were defying, were rebellious against the tradition, against their society, but each one had her own approach. Okay, so good. Today, then we yes.
There's something about her religion.
Mhm.
That,
Yeah, she has her own stance.
Her own view about religion. It is not for the Puritan, even though her father is a Puritan man, and also there's not the same idea of that from Christianity.
She rejected religion. You know, she rebelled against the traditional Christian church. You know. Okay. Yes.
Like, I like the critics, the critic William Holmes said yes, yes, he said that it's okay that strange poetry, yet she had made a distinctive addition to literature of the world of America.
Yeah.
So it's like a
What's his name?
distinctive feature. Holmes, William Holmes.
William Hole.
Don Holmes.
Yes.
It's an amazing quote about her.
Yes.
Huh?
Amazing quote about her.
Yeah, I think, you know, was he like a modern critic or like, you see?
Pre-modernist poet.
Huh?
No, 19th century.
He's like, he was one of her critics and she was, you know, she admired him and they were exchanging letters, you know.
But that's why we
I don't know. So there might be, you know, because during, it's very important, like, to understand the mindset of Emily Dickinson, to read her letters to friends. You know, she valued very much friendship.
And even Bloom in the 20th century
Uh-huh.
placed her alongside the most.
Yeah, she was ahead of her time. Like when Rani said she's the greatest, you know, American, she was ahead of her time. And I think, you know, you could say she's a modern writer like Edgar Allan Poe. She was a precursor of modernism by the way she touched upon her own, like, I mean, her poetry is poetry of ideas. She's very intellectual. She's not straightforward. Okay, let's take a little bit biography about her. As you see, Emily Dickinson was born in 1830, and is, you know, like, we're talking about 19th century, and she died, I think, 60, or you know, she lived 50 years, 86. She's considered like a great poet. She was not known because her poetry was not published during her lifetime. She was reclusive. She stayed at, you know, at her home. Like, I would like to draw this analogy. You know, she was a rebellious woman. And if you remember when we discussed Huckleberry Finn, like, which was the place, I mean, which was the ideal place for him? It was the raft, nature. And here, you know, the ideal place for her is not nature, is her home, her house. She thought that this is the place where she was able to transcend, were able to moralize, to create her own new world.
But she was talking with people from the door. Like,
Yeah, from behind the door. Yeah, but she was also communicating by throwing or you know, giving them some flowers, assuming that these are flowers. These flowers are, you know, the flowers from you know, the Garden of Eden. So it seems like she created her own heaven and hell. Okay, and this is very individual approach to religion. Like you know, she rejected the established church in Massachusetts. And she started like to reject. She didn't like the speeches of, or the sermons, and she decided to start her own religion by creating her own word, by having her own idiosyncratic perception of God, and you know, that was like the word. This is her own word. I'm going to read some quotes, you know, about how she perceived her own individual word. Okay. She wrote many. As I said, she was very prolific writer. She wrote, many poems. But during her lifetime, only 7 of her poems were published. It seems like her poems were, she was writing poetry against the expectation of time. And you should know that Emily Dickinson was not the only writer who wrote poetry during the 19th century. There were many other poems. And during that time, it was Victorian time, of course. Women creativity was not highly considered. Even like women education was not valued. And we have an issue, or Emily Dickinson has an issue with her father because her father refused. They brought her from college. She was learning chemistry. She was good at chemistry and algebra. And he sent, her father sent her, brother Austin to bring her by force because they didn't want, they thought that education would make her too intellectual. And this is not good for a woman during that time. Okay? But Emily Dickinson was the kind of stubborn, obstinate, who, achieved herself, who defied the authority of the church, the authority of the father, and the authority of the whole masculine society. Okay. Of course, she had certain, attempts of, but all her experiences of love failed. The question of women's sexual feelings has been subject to a lot of recent writings. But again, there are a lot of debates about her. But those writers failed to understand the nature of her life. She had some, relationship, and, it didn't succeed. We don't know why. Was it because of the nature of society itself? How men, what kind of roles they gave to women, and how women were relegated to mere housewives, which she rejected. Her sister-in-law, Susan Gilbert, Susan Gilbert, to whom she wrote hundreds of letters, might have also been, this is like some of, the critics say, accuse her, because she exchanged letters with, Susan, so they thought that she had, they're very, very funny, I don't want to spend fun fact, Emily was educated at Marist Academy, which had started taking female students 2 years. It's called Holyoke College, and she excelled. She became, and she was very proud of herself. When she was taken by force, she kept, imagining herself a top student, and there was her, classmate Abia, her name. She was exchanging letters, assuming that she's better than her student. Her story is heartbroken. That was the spirit of the 19th century. This is she entered Mount Holyoke Female Seminary, and then she was forced to leave that. It's very important to read her autobiography, because I think, her autobiography, has much to do with her poetry. Let me just read some quotes here, and what I like to write here when I contrasted Emily Dickinson with Huck, in the tradition of protest and reform, that is basic dimension of American culture, Emily Dickinson refused to be diminished by the constraints of feminine virtue and property that paralyzed so many Victorian women writers. Although she never lectured in the Lechem on such issues as women's rights, immigration, and unions, as did her contemporary Anna Dickinson, who was not a relative, Emily Dickinson was a pioneer who chose the domestic as her frontier, because it provided the space and freedom to write. In doing So she subverted the tradition of true womanhood to serve her poetic mission. Like, yes, home is for house chores, but here she's challenging, she is subverting. And instead of home being a place for, like doing the house chores, it's a place for creativity. So this is what we mean by subverting. And as I told you, Huck, achieved himself, found himself, on the raft, and, Emily Dickinson found herself at home. I like reading these titles, like one of her poems called The Soul Selects Her Own Society. We said Emily Dickinson had to contend with the three authorities. And in the three authorities, she had to challenge male. Like she had to reject religion, and here, like Christ, represented by Christ, a man. Her father, the authority, her father was very strict father. He was, an advocate, and he was very strict man. He thought that reading books would gobble her mind, would spoil her, would make her less sensitive. She also had to contend with the idea of future husband because she was not happy with a man doing these stupid things, according to her. Just I want to read a letter, an extract from a letter written to Abia, her schoolmate, telling her, "You may be surprised, like Abia, you may be surprised to hear me speak as I do, knowing that I express no interest in all the important subject. But I'm not happy, and I regret that last term, when the golden opportunity was mine, that I did not give up and become a Christian. It's not now too late. So my friends tell me, so my offended conscience whispers, but it is hard for me to give up the word." I cannot give up the word. I cannot give up the word in the way the Christians would give up. I like the word. I have. And she says, the soul selects her own society. I'm now working a pair of slippers to adorn my father's feet. We will finish an education sometime, won't we? You may then be Plato, and I will be Socrates, provided you won't be wiser than I am. So she cherished herself. And she wrote a letter to, Higginson, one of her editors. She said, "Father buys me many books, but begs me not to read them." Because, he was afraid. Because he fears they joggle the mind. So, you have a writer who was like stubborn. She was full of challenge. She wanted to create her own word. And in one of her poems, which stresses self or autonomy, the feeling of autonomy, she say, "Title divine is mine, the wife without the sign, acute decree conferred on me, empress of Calvary, royal all but the crown, betrothed without the swoon. God sends a woman, God sends us women. When you hold a garnet to garnet, gold to gold, born, bridled, shrouded in a day." Like here how she cherishes her self-autonomy. "My husband," women say, stroking the melody, "is this the way?" This is like how she rejected the idea of the husband, because the idea of the husband was connected, was associated with authority. So it's very important to read her life, to read her biography in order to gain more insight into her poetry. As I said at the beginning of this lecture, we are going to look at two poems, one which was written by Whitman and Emily Dickinson. Will you start by Emily Dickinson, A Spider? This is Emily Dickinson. The spider holds a silver bowl. The spider holds a silver bowl. It's the same, the title. In unperceived hands, and dancing softly to himself. His yarn of pearl unwinds. He plies from note to note in unsubstantial trade, supplants our tapestries with his in half the period. An hour to rear supreme his continents of light, then dangle from the housewife's broom his boundaries forgot. Very short poem, and very symbolic. So have you read this poem? Yes. What do you think of this poem? Yes.
The first thing I want to say that the same line of the first stanza, because Dickinson's poem has no titles.
Yes.
That's why we take the first line and just make it a title. Besides, the first stanza I read that is about like the creation itself process. That's it. And dancing softly to himself, capitalized, it means the creator himself is proud about his creation.
Very good. Who's proud? Who's creating what? Who's creating? The creation itself? Yes. Now, who's the spider? Now here, what is the spider? So, who's the spider? The spider is a spider, okay. But if we want to take this poem as symbolic, so the spider should be somebody else. Okay. So what is the spider doing? Let us stick to the literal meaning of this. What is the spider doing here? It's holding a silver ball. Why? To dance? No. What is this? He is no, he plies he's trying to build its web. Have you ever seen a spider web?
Yes.
How is it?
Very weak.
Huh?
Very weak.
Very weak. But
It's like.
But what?
Like architecture.
Yeah, very beautiful. It's a tapestry, isn't it? I think if you want to design something like this, you might need ages. So it has a complex shape. It is very, it's artistic. It has this wonderful shape, wonderful construction. It's not easy.
Usually women hate seeing this in their houses.
Yeah.
This is like, oh my God, what she's describing, and it's like a beautiful scene to have.
Yes. So here, we see a spider is holding a bowl, and this bowl is full of threads, and he plies from note to note, from one extreme to another, to build what? A continent. How is it compared? A continent of light. It's like a continent. If you look at the web of the spider, it's like a continent with all these lines. Okay.
And then it's
In unperceived hands. What is unperceived hands?
like mean hands.
You don't see them. You don't see. They are not visible. They're not visible. And dancing softly to himself. So the dancing is,
He's happy doing this.
he's happy doing this. So this is but don't you think this is little bit egocentric? The spider is dancing, is not dancing to please anybody, but it is dancing to please himself.
Softly to himself.
Yes. And dancing softly to himself, his yarn of pearl. Wow. The yarn, we know what is the yarn, the thread, is of pearl. It's glowing like this, unwinds. He plies from note to note, from one extreme to another, in unsubstantial trade. Substantial, useful. Unsubstantial, not beneficial. Like the trade, he's not waiting any return for this. Like the spider, I'm paraphrasing the poem. The spider is not expecting any return from such a process of creation. In us, supplants our tapestries with his. What's mean supplants?
Replace.
replaces our tapestry with his. So usually when you go like in certain desert places, like, or in certain houses which were left for some time, you find that the web of the spider is supplanting, any tapestry or any scene in the house. Supplanting, replacing. So supplants our tapestries with his in half the period, in a very short time. It's not like us. It takes us long time to create, but this takes shorter time. An hour to rear supreme, it takes an hour. His continence of light, it takes an hour to create such a wonderful thing. And then what happens? Then a dangle from the housewife broom, just dangle like this, and what happens to it? His boundaries forgot. What a sad thing is it? So what? So what? Death. Yes?
Maybe the spider symbolizes herself writing poetry. And poetry is the like her continent of light. It's the web of her continent of light. And she doesn't wait any return. She started from from nothing, from naught to naught, and she's not waiting for any return. And then the authorities in her life, represents in the house wife's role. It's like keeping her aside.
Yeah, so the most important thing is like she would entertain herself. She would enjoy living this moment of, in the continent of light. Then, what happens?
The role becomes
Okay, good.
I feel she gives us very pessimistic ideas. About first, she gives us her authority as himself, as a man, and then talked about her creativity. Then nothing.
How is the housewife is viewed here? Like the housewife is viewed as a murderer, as a killer. Like she has an issue with, a housewife. She's careless. Like she doesn't, imagine a housewife would appreciate the web like this. Wow, what a wonderful, This is what she was expecting? No. But like a housewife at least would, spend some time looking at how wonderful this creation is. Now this housewife didn't look, she just, with a dangle of her broom, and everything was gone. I don't want to reveal, this, but I want to go to Whitman's writing. This is the third poem we are talking in American literature about spider. I remember one last student wrote a report about spider, how spiders are there in American. You see?
Dickinson have another one spider.
Yeah.
This.
Okay, let's see. This is a spider, and try to contrast between the two, because here, if we succeed in contrasting and reaching something to say this is how they are different, it would be a starting point to approach Emily Dickinson. A noiseless, patient spider I marked where on a little promontory it stood isolated. Promontory, it's like a hill, something high. It's like a cliff, okay? Marked how it explored the vacant, vast surrounding. Marked how to explore. I marked how it, to explore the surrounding. It launched forth filament out of itself. What is the filament? It's the yarn, the thread. So it was launching. Why was that? Was it substantial or unsubstantial? Like here it is substantial trade. There it is unsubstantial trade. So here there is a purpose. There was no purpose. Like the spider, was dancing to himself. The trade was unsubstantial. But here, the trade is substantial. Why? Because it launched forth filament out of itself, ever reeling them, ever tirelessly spreading them. So why was it like, launching the filament? What is the purpose?
To explore the
I don't know.
Fast and
Because, if you are standing on a promontory like this, and, there is like a gap between you and your surrounding, you need what? You need a bridge. So the spider was launching these filaments to connect itself with the surrounding, the outside world. See what I mean? So that was, why we called it substantial trait. Now, and you, my soul, where you stand, surrounded, detached in measureless oceans of space, ceaselessly musing, venturing, throwing, seeking the spheres to connect them, till the bridge you will need be formed, till the ductile anchor holds, till the gossamer thread you fling catch somewhere, oh my soul. This is like Whitman. So, don't you think there is like a kind of conceit, let's say? What is a conceit? It is an analogy, it's a comparison between two dissimilar things. So here, and you, my soul, where you stand, surrounded, detached in measureless oceans of space, ceaselessly musing, venturing, throwing, seeking the spheres to connect them, till the bridge you will need be formed, till the ductile anchor holds, till the gossamer thread you fling catch somewhere. Oh, my soul.
His soul is the spider.
His soul is, no, his soul is like a spider.
Yes.
Doing what?
Because I see it.
Doing what?
Trying to connect with the
Connect.
around it.
How would, like if we imagine the persona of Whitman, like trying to connect with, what would be the, let's say, the yarn? Would it be like, so if we want to accept the symbolism, and so what does like this filament stand for? There is filament here. He's going to do something.
His poetry.
The soul, his poetry.
Maybe here the filament is the body. according
Yes.
to Whitman.
It could be the body, but like again, it's his poetry. His poetry, like, because I celebrate myself, and what I assume, you shall assume. You see what I mean? So it is his poetry which will connect him with, yes. So here, as you see, we are having two individuals, one cherishing his or her individualism without merging, with society, and the other cherishes his individualism, but, in connection with others. Like, again, this is the paradox we saw in Whitman's poetry. Whitman was an individual. He was celebrating himself as an individual, but at the same time, he saw himself as a seer, as a prophet. He had a message. And I think the two poems, like, contrast. You see, in Dickinson, what was the purpose of her poetry? Just to please herself. To please herself as an individual. So, but here, it is more than this. I would leave for you an interpretation of the two poems to look, because these two poems are considered here in this book. So I can Xerox, the interpretation. You can look at how they are contrasted. Yes, Taj?
Like he's also Whitman inserting himself. He's using I and then my. So
Yeah.
Dickinson, she doesn't.
Yeah, like, we didn't have like, here, we don't have the I.
Yes.
You see, the spider holds. It's like very polemic, but when we need some intellectual, ability to decipher such, a riddle. It's like a riddle, like. See what I mean? But here it's easier. It is, I mean Whitman. So let's go to the beginning of the presentation and keep like, this is where we said Emily was educated at Emerist Academy, which had started taking female, and she was like not given a chance to complete. Whitman, if you remember, did not. He was self-educated, and here we have self-educated because she was denied. But Whitman was not denied. It was, like he didn't think that schooling. He left school when he was 11, and he was working as an apprentice.
He has his own choice.
Yes. So self-reliance, you could say, we can feel that in both writers we have self-reliance. Both of them achieved themselves. They were self-made. She, was not having, she was not following the conventional views of religion, and I think Whitman was the same. Whitman refused the traditional religion, and he refused the idea of the original sin, if you remember. Here she refused to sign an oath to dedicate her life to Jesus Christ and to give up the word. She thought that the word is fine. She has nothing wrong with the word. Even though she had clearly a belief in God, and heaven, but it was different than the views held by her peers. She had her individual, idiosyncratic view of, life. She imagined, she created in her world of unconsciousness a new word, an independent word. Friendship, was part. She valued friendship. She had a lot of friends. We mentioned some of them. She, of course, had friendship with men, One, as we said, like William Howell, one of the critics, and here one of her editors, And like this, Thomas Higginson, she was not happy with him because he was hard, on his criticism. She thought that he was very hard. She sent him a brief note with 4 of her poems with the message, "Are you too deeply occupied to say if my verse is alive?" She was skeptical. He was a man. He was fascinated and asked for more poems. Yes, there were correspondence between them. Higginson said that soon after this first moment, Emily talked easily and continuously. He later said, "I never was with anyone who drained my nerve power too much." He started to like her. But as I said, he was very, tough censor. He was not uneasy. He kept editing and asking her to change, and she didn't like that, I think, this is what I said. It's very important to know something about her life. Her poetry, this is like the issue of publication. We talk about them. And I think, Whitman, we did a lot of Whitman. But both of them are romantic, you could say. Whitman was romantic, and here she is romantic, Next time we're going to see more of her. I think in literary criticism we are reading a poem she wrote, about birds, swallows, these natural creatures. And she had this kind of cordiality between her and nature. When we are reading next time the Narrow we'll see how much she valued these little creatures. Okay. But her romanticism is different from, the romanticism of Whitman. Whitman thought that his romanticism should be substantial. Here, her romanticism is like that of Edgar Allan Poe to some extent. It was like egocentric romanticism. Both of them were creative. Both of them were ahead of her time. Both of them were rebellious. They were challenging the traditions of poetry. Here you have poetry which does not stick to traditional rhyme, does not stick to traditional meter, and you have almost poetry of ideas. Like here, the ideas are orchestrated. Yes, Emily Dickinson was more symbolic. Her symbolism, yeah, it doesn't mean that Whitman was not a symbolist, but here more enigmatic. And I think it was a kind of a challenge because during her time, women were accused of being sentimental. And here the challenge is, yes, I can write poetry, even more intellectual than men would write. I think this today is a good introduction to Emily Dickinson. I wish next time those presenters, like who would present another fellow, and I could not stop for death, and I had a funeral in my mind, like would be here. If they are not, we are going to continue. Okay? Do you have any question? Thank you.